Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall, and I'm talking again today to UFO researcher John Hanson. Welcome, John.
Welcome yourself, Richard.
Yeah. And the last couple of shows we have discussed your series of books called Haunted Skies, which charts the British UFO phenomenon from 1940. Well, it's going to be up to the present day, but you're currently up to the 1970s.
77 we're working on at the moment, yes.
Right. And in today's show, we're going to focus on Volume 3, which covers 1966 to 1967. And it was, as we said last week, there must have been a lot of activity in those years because the earlier volume, 1940, covers what, 1942?
It covers 1940 to 59.
Right.
In an ideal world, I suppose, if we'd had the time and we to commit ourselves more fully to Volume 1, we could have put a lot more information into Volume 1, but this is how it's turned out to be.
Okay.
Obviously, the older back you go, the less information you're going to find readily. But the third volume that you've just held up there, in my opinion, that is a phenomenal book because it covers 2 years, and apart from the events of 66, to most people that are interested in the subject, the 1967 period is a period that is often referred to by researchers as sightings of the Flying Cross, well, which not only were seen in the States but also in England, and peaked towards the end of October 67. And as you can see from inside the book, there was a phenomenal number of sightings, including the famous police chase involving 2 constables that followed the object for many miles through Devon.
So it peaked at the end of October 67. That's my date of birth almost.
Right.
2nd of November 67. Well, there you go.
You were born after then, though.
Okay. Right, so we're going to start with one case, which was from 1966.
Yes, right. Undoubtedly, this case is always fascinated me, not necessarily because it involves a police officer, but it is really good.
Just to remind viewers, John is a police was a police officer and has worked in CID.
Yes, for a number of years. This has happened at 4:10 a.m. on the 7th of January '66, and it involved Police Constable Colin Clive Perks, was then aged 28, and he was checking out the back door of a shop behind Finnegan's shop, now Hooper's, in Oldley Road, Wilmslow, Cheshire, when he heard a high-pitched whining noise, and then he was amazed to see a greenish-grey flying object hovering about 35 feet off the ground, approximately 100 yards away above the grass of a meadow. He reckoned it was about 20 feet in width and 35 feet in length, elliptical in shape and emanating an eerie glow. The interesting thing about that particular case is that, as you can see here, and that it is covered on the 25th of March '66 by UFO log, and although a lot of this information was kept secret initially, some of the publicity surrounding the sighting was released to the paper, the newspapers. But I'll show you that, Richard. That was the third one down. That's an illustration of the craft and a rough.
So this is the organisation from the Isle of Wight, UFO log.
Yeah.
So, but there were logging cases not just in the Isle of Wight. This was all over the UK.
That was the sort of it was a clearing centre in the Isle of Wight for, in the same way that towards the later years people would send their material off to Bufora.
Right.
Well, in those years they sent it off to the Isle of Wight Society.
All right.
And you can see
so we've got an actual picture of it there. So this is in UFO log. That's the log there. All right, and John, so what else can you tell us about
Well, I was just going to tell you, if you want to take a look at this, is interesting. This shows you the value of UFO log can mean to us now. We couldn't determine the exact date, but look at the date on that one there, and look at the object.
So that item.
That's 4:10 on the 7th of January '66.
Was seen on 4:10 on the 7th of January
by the police
66.
officer.
and then we've got another report, either the 7th or the 26th.
Intriguing, by that lady who lives in the same town, just up the road from where he had his sighting, and it's a source saved object. So
So would that be somebody who worked at UFO Log that would make these drawings, John, or is that
no,
is that a witness drawing, or?
they would get these. They would get an original report sent to them.
Okay.
And then they would transcribe it onto the UFO Log itself.
Right.
Anyway, the officer went back to the police station. He spoke to a police sergeant that returned to the scene with him in the morning and found that the whole of the area was covered with what appeared to be fine glass, like a powdered glass, which is, and then of course the matter was then brought to the attention of Gordon Creighton, who was then a consultant for Flying Saucer Review, who I met during the years before he passed away. And although I don't mention it because nobody's really interested, but he did actually make Dawn and myself consultants, and he believed in what we were doing then. As I say, sadly he's passed away. But this was an excellent case, and we were able to obtain some photos of the officer, or the officer, after speaking to Gary Hesseltine, who was most helpful. That's a photograph. You've got some photographs, some images anyway, of police officer, but that's an image that we had done by our artist. And then you will see the image at the bottom was presumably done by the officer.
Right.
But Gary Hesseltine interviewed him. By the time we got to him, he passed away. But his wife gave us some lovely photos.
So were there any other witnesses?
Yeah, I did speak to a UFO researcher, Derek Woods from Sale. He contacted us, and he said that he'd actually been contacted by a farmer from Oldley Edge, which is 2 miles from the town centre. And the farmer said he knew about a nurse who was near the Rex Cinema, Wilmslow, on the same day when she sighted what she believed to have been the same saucer-shaped object moving through the sky, but fearing ridicule, chose to keep quiet. Now, the Rex Cinema was where all this debris was found, described as broken windscreen glass that disappeared from view 1.5 hours later. Interesting stuff. And I did, in fact, mention to Nick Pope a couple of years ago about there was one, we talked about declassified records for the MOD, but there was one snippet in, I think it was a couple of years ago, where all it was a man from Birmingham had seen a UFO pass over. And then when he got up the next morning, he found his garden and the bushes covered in a fine powder. So he collected the fine powder and put it in a jam jar. And then he heard no more. So I asked Nick would somebody from the MOD have investigated it? In other words, would somebody have gone up and picked up the jam jar? And he said they probably would. But he didn't have any knowledge of that. But
You don't say.
That's right. But we would... I mean, we've come across reports of some people say it's angel hair, is it, or
Right.
this sort of stuff that is the debris that falls off UFOs,
Right.
and some people say it's spiders' webs. But again, that's matters that we've researched into. But what a heaven-sent opportunity there, because you know, if somebody could have collected the material and had it analysed, but it's like most things we've looked at. It's passed into history, and we're not going to find any more than what we know. But full marks to Gary for interviewing him. And I must just say that on the July '66, that Prime Minister Harold Wilson he was answered some questions on UFOs, and Sir John Langford Holt asked the Prime Minister on the 19th of July.
This was an MP, John, in Parliament.
Yeah, Sir John Langford Holt asked the Prime Minister on the 19th of July '66 whether, in view of the fact that the Secretary of State for Defence is responsible only for the air defence implications of the reports of unidentified flying objects, he will allocate to a department the duty of assessing the wider implications of these reports. Well, to me, I don't know, that's a mouthful. I know that it's suggesting air defence implications to UFOs, but the Prime Minister replied, no, sir. So Sir John continued, is the Prime Minister aware that enormous numbers of reports are coming into the government from people, not all of whom are cranks? Would it not be appropriate, without me knowing very much about the origins or significance of these items, that somebody in the government should at least take a serious interest? The Prime Minister replied, these matters are taken seriously when the reports which are received are sufficiently detailed to enable a check to be made. In very many cases there are natural phenomena such as balloons, aircraft and so on. Where it has not been possible to get a satisfactory explanation, it is usually because the information has been inadequate or imprecise for investigation, which actually leads us on to the next sighting, which is from a guy who was prolific with UFO research during those years, a guy called Keith Palmer.
Just to interrupt you there, John. That sounds like that's been written for him, for the Prime Minister to just read out verbatim, would you say?
Well, it would be. I'm sure it would be.
It's their line on it, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, I was saying that another chap that we desperately try to get in touch with used to be a UFO researcher from the Banbury area, this guy called Keith Palmer. Mm-hmm. And he's prior to this, was living in Wood Green, London. And he was responsible for organising a number of sky watches in the London and Banbury area during the 70s. Mm-hmm. Now, he wrote to Prime Minister Harold Wilson, telling him of a very nasty experience my wife and had at 2 a.m. 15th of August 66, when we saw a large UFO with flames shooting out of it about 800 yards away, approaching the house. It suddenly came right at us and whizzed over the house, showing rows and rows of little lights underneath, as a result of which I suffered a number of burns about the size of a sixpence on my body. Now, he was subsequently, we're pretty sure he never got a reply from the Prime Minister, but he was interviewed by Colin McCarthy of Flying Saucer Review. We spoke to Colin, who's living in Australia, and he confirmed certain things to us. And so Keith told him that he was visiting the bathroom at that time, about 2 a.m., but on the way back to the bedroom, I mean, I suppose he has to say he's visiting the bathroom, but anyway, I just happened to glance out through the net curtains when I saw a bright white light. I pulled back the nets and opened the window to a beautiful North London night sky, warm and full of the stars. The light I saw was 500 yards from my window. It was brilliant, it almost dazzled me. As I watched, I couldn't hear anything apart from slight traffic sounds in the distance. Suddenly, two smaller lights then shot out from both sides, and a brilliant cone-shaped beam appeared. It was then that I noticed throughout the beam that it was 2:10 a.m. on my wristwatch. And then he saw an oak tree in the field below the object. He could still see the plasma-type balls of light, consisting of a big one in the centre and two smaller ones on either side. Now, what did we say before? The prominence of three, whether there's a big one, two small ones, or whether there's two big ones and a small one. Okay. So anyway, and then he says after about maybe a minute, the two smaller white lights went out. The centre light started to move, wobbled slightly, and rose as a huge brilliant light. And then as it came towards me, the brilliance seemed to dim, and at that stage he looked up to see a huge pear-shaped object with thousands of small lights rotating around on the underside of what he refers to as a craft as high as a 20-storey building. He felt a tingling sensation as the craft, which was approximately 300 feet in width, slowly drifted over the back of the house to the front. He rushed out of the bedroom to the room in the front, hoping to see it, but there's nothing there. Excuse me. Now, he ran out into the street still in his pyjamas, but nothing was seen. He called the local police, only to be told, oh no, not another one.
So this is a big, a pretty big object,
yeah.
300 feet.
That's right. And then the officer took his phone number, and Keith then discovered that the right side of my face, hands and right arm, were covered in reddish brown flaky patches. And then the police called him at 5:30 and took him to the police station. And Keith said that while he was there, he saw at least 15 other people who were being interviewed. And then he said all of us had to be taken to the Ministry of Defence in London to talk and sketch what we had seen separated from each other. And he said the results were exciting because people had seen this object from different angles and all said it was pear-shaped. The area where I saw the craft was roped off by the civil defence and police for several days. Furthermore, the oak tree never grew again and 3 large holes were found in the ground. And then, as I say, we spoke to Colin. Colin confirms that was the report that was given to him. But Colin has no information about the area being cordoned off by the police and MOD. So once again, we're in a situation where individually, the guy received the tanning or the slight burning to his skin, but that reminds me of a case in Dudley where we interviewed a gentleman who was working on a building site, and he saw a triangular shaped object hovering over the area. And bearing in mind it was on a building site, so he got gloves, hat, he got his work gear on, but it was so close he said he could have thrown a stone. So he threw a stone at it. He was going to throw a stone, and then it moved off. The next morning he found the parts of his body which hadn't been covered were all quite burnt. Now, we didn't see him till about 10 years after this, and I was sat here like I'm sat with you, and I said to the original report, you know, what was the nature of your injuries? And he said, up to then, he'd been quite calm. He was an ex-company director. He said, I'll show you. And he started to weep. And he took his shirt off, and his back was absolutely still burnt.
Really?
The scars, it was horrible. And he said that happened after. He hadn't got it before, after the sighting.
Right.
So again, okay, you've only got his word for it, but he didn't say that if you like, I excuse the horrible expression, but he didn't say little green men came out and zapped him with ray guns, which is what the science fiction novels would have us believe. This was his, and it's something we've come across so many times.
There's a case that I've covered in the States where something similar happened, and the guy died shortly after having presumably radiation or... Yeah,
you don't get, well, I say you don't get many where death occurs as a result of quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I say quickly, but people, I've had some pretty strange...
This was within a few years, I think,
and
it happened on a golf course. And it's not the only case where that has happened.
No, undoubtedly there are many, but you know, whether these interactions are being deliberately orchestrated to cause harm is something I doubt very much. But sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong. You might not agree with me.
Yeah, my guess would be it's a byproduct of the craft's propulsion system.
I couldn't more agree with you. It is a byproduct. There's no, if you like, there's no malevolence.
No, I don't think they're firing a beam at...
Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. All right, and John, we're going to go for the first break. And
right,
after
thank
the break,
you very much.
We're going to be discussing Haunted Skies Volume 3 in more detail. Welcome back. I'm talking to John Hanson about his series of books on UK UFO cases called Haunted Skies. Now, we were talking about a case in which someone seems to have had burns created by a UFO. And we both sort of agreed that we don't think that was some kind of malevolent action.
Well, it certainly wouldn't appear to be, because if whatever these things are, if they wanted to, if the reasoning behind their intelligence was that they wanted to cleanse man off this planet, we wouldn't be sat here.
With that type of technology,
that's
which
right,
is seen in their craft, assuming that's what they are.
A bit like War of the Worlds, wouldn't it?
And very interesting. In the last show, we had James Salandon, who he witnessed this UFO come right up to his cockpit, and it flew off, etc. And he said in the phone call that they're friendly. There was nothing that
Well,
led him.
I mean, for years people have either the amount of people that have had a close encounter and then gone on to completely change their life, and for sometimes for the better, mostly for the better rather than the worse. And then there's other people that bitterly regret they've ever had a close encounter,
Right.
so they look upon it as malevolent, but far more tend to look upon it as benevolent, which I think is maybe, I don't know, you can apply benevolent and malevolent to
No,
I think so. It's only our phraseology,
Yeah.
if you want, to describe something that we really don't know
Yeah.
what the heck we're dealing with. But
You can't put it into those terms.
No.
You can look at the evidence and try and discuss motives, what their
Yeah.
motives are, and their reasoning or logic, etc., as to why they're doing X, Y, and Z. But to attach malevolence and benevolence, for me,
No, it doesn't.
you're
It
getting
doesn't
into
feel right,
emotions.
yeah. That's
There's
right,
emotion
yeah,
attached to those
yeah.
words, right? Which is a very human thing.
It is.
So
yeah.
you're colouring the scientific study of it with human emotion, and for me, that needs to be kept out of it, because until you understand the facts and don't deviate from the facts, which include motivations as to why they're here and what their program is,
Yeah.
you get sucked into that argument of, oh, they're here to be nice to us, or they're here to deceive us, and it's not. For me, it's
It's not as clear.
It's not as clear cut.
No, it never will be. We've spoken to. Again, I didn't realise till we spoke to Nigel. I didn't realise. He's never told me about the vivid dreams that he's been experiencing. And normally people will have vivid dreams, as you know, after an encounter. And I think we both know what those dreams involve. But he's having them now. I mean, for all I know, he might have a medical problem, or he might have some medicine that's causing. I don't know, but it's strange that so many people have these vivid dreams after, and it's a byproduct, isn't it?
There is a school of thought that, and I discussed this on my show a few weeks ago, that consciousness, or the non-physical aspect of human beings, can be made contact with via other entities.
Yeah,
And,
I'm sure.
and that maybe manifests itself in dreams or what have you. But again, I don't like to err into areas where we can't really have any concrete evidence. But it's interesting to note it.
But there is concrete evidence in as much that sometimes these objects will leave trace marks. We know that. The guy that passed away and still had problems with some marks on his chest, their sighting in '66, that was a triangular object, but it was hot enough to melt flint. That the heat was hot enough there to melt flint. So something caused that heat. Yeah.
All right, John. Well, have you got another case for us from Volume 3?
This was a sighting that was given us by David Rainey,